Last week, a groundbreaking satellite was launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and it promises to provide a myriad of data, not just for meteorologists around the world. We're joined today by a Penn State graduate from the class of 2004 from the Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science, and she had a hand in producing the forecast for that very launch. Please welcome to the show Jess Williams. She is the launch weather officer for the 45th Weather Squadron in the Space Force. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Absolutely. So for those unfamiliar, take us through what is the 45th Weather Squadron and what do you do?
So at the 45th Weather Squadron, we issue forecasts, we issue watches, warnings, and advisories for any activity going on at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and Kennedy Space Center for launches or ground operations.
And so let's actually hone in now on GOES-T. Take us back to last week. What was the process for making these forecasts? When did you start actually issuing forecasts to NASA and the folks involved with the launch?
So we always start issuing our forecast 4 days prior to launch, and it's called L-4 forecast, and then L-3 successively out to L-0 on launch day. So Friday was the first forecast that was issued. We also issue what's called an exposure forecast for the rocket, and that includes really 24-hour-a-day forecast in case the rocket is exposed to any severe weather. Now, the launch forecast really will just include a probability of violating for weather during that launch window. And some launches have an instantaneous window, but this launch in particular had a 2-hour window.
Gotcha. Do you ever provide any forecasts for, more of a longer range out, maybe as much as like 10 days out?
Yes, we do. Certain variables. So actually for this forecast, we also issued a 10-day temperature forecast. And that was obviously 10 days before the launch, and that's for the performance of solid rocket motors.
You mentioned variables, so I think that's a perfect transition here to this next question. What are the specific variables that you're looking for when you make your forecasts?
So for our launch forecast, we are mostly honed in on the clouds, because those clouds, if they have a certain electric field, they can trigger lightning when the rocket is launched. So we are looking at the base of the clouds, the height of the clouds, the depth, and really we're especially honed in on that 0 degrees Celsius through negative 20 degrees Celsius, where most of that electrification process can occur. So that's our primary concern on launch day. A more secondary concern is the launch vehicle or customer constraints, which can be wind or temperature or space weather.
What are some of the tools that you use when you're looking at making a cloud forecast?
Sure. Our primary tool is radar. We get updates every 3 minutes, and we have our own radar, weather surveillance radar that's close by, and we can scan that in. We're looking at the 0 dBz line for radar for what we consider our cloud edge. And we are using that primarily. Our secondary tool is lightning. So obviously if there's any natural lightning in the area, we'll be concerned for that within 10 miles. And then we also have our own suite of what we call field mills, which measure the electrical field at the surface, and those measure that in volts per meter. And we have certain criteria for those too. If they're elevated above a specific level, we would be no-go.
Do different types of rockets or launches require different types of forecasts?
Actually, yes, they do. We do issue our standard, we have 10 lightning launch commit criteria, and that's where we're monitoring the clouds. But for each rocket, we have a different constraint for wind or solar weather or temperature. Some don't have any constraints for temperature, some do. Some don't have any space weather constraints, and then some have very low wind constraints, and some are higher.
Do you actually get to make the call to scrub a launch?
Yes, so we actually say that weather is no-go. We don't make the official scrub call, but there's no way that they can launch when weather is no-go. I have had to do that twice. It's not fun, but you have to do it because it's better to not have the rocket launch and to lose money than to have the rocket perhaps be triggered by lightning and explode in the air.
On GOES-T launch day last week, were you actually in the mission control room when the rocket was leaving the pad?
Not in the mission control room, but I was in the same building. So we have so many people for a launch like this that's so big with NASA involved. There's over 200 people that are in different rooms on different control centers. We have what's called like a console operator panel at our desk, and we communicate with the mission control room for the range, and we communicate with the Mission Control Room at NASA. We also communicate with the Mission Control Room at United Launch Alliance. So we are in our own room, but we are really just weather.
Have you had situations where lightning has struck, one of the vehicles or one of the rockets while it's on the pad the night before?
Thankfully, not since I've been here, and that is because we have lightning protection system around the launch pad. So we have our wind towers with wind anemometers at 230 feet, and what they do is they put a lightning protection system around those 4 wind towers around that light launch pad. So we have had several instances where we've had very close strokes, like within half a mile, with a high voltage, high amplitude, but they have not triggered an issue because of our lightning protection. However, before those were developed, we have had issues here before I got here.
Is there a particular time of year that is easier to have a launch versus others? I mean, it being Florida, I'm assuming once you get into thunderstorm season, that becomes increasingly more challenging.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say December, January, February are the best years for weather. And as you mentioned, you get into the summer, if they schedule a launch anytime between 11 and 7 or 8 p.m., we're always worried about lightning. And so they actually reschedule their launches sometimes for that and put them in overnight. Of course, that makes us have to work a night shift, but it's better than having it be no-go.
All right. Well, Jess Williams, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for chatting with us about your job and your important role, that is, of making forecasts for these launches down in Cape Canaveral. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on Weather World, and we'll be back in just a moment with more.